Okay, so welcome back to another Tatu Sadhu 420 and Kiss Organic Soil Nerd video. Hope you guys enjoyed the interview with Jared. Hopefully we'll keep making those interviews. I've got one I'm going to drop with Green Bodie after I do the sour review, and I've got pretty sure I know where how the sour review is going to end up at this point. So stay tuned. I'm excited to drop that. We could do another 20 videos on nitrogen. It really does drive the train, but just for the sake of brevity and to keep things interesting and moving along, we're going to move on to phosphorus today. Just like nitrogen, phosphorus is an essential macronutrient, chemical symbol P, atomic weight 30.974, and atomic number 15 if you're looking for it on the periodic table. And just a quick note on phosphorus on the fertilizer bag, organic or inorganic, doesn't matter. That number actually does not represent the percentage of P like it does the percentage of N, nitrogen. It actually is showing the percentage of P2O5, not phosphorus itself. So there's a similar issue with potassium that we'll deal with when we get there. But phosphorus is really important. It's usually the second most limiting element after nitrogen. You know, we've discussed that our plants have, 94 to 95% of the tissue is carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and then nitrogen makes up 1.5%. So that's really small, but it's really impactful. And so phosphorus is only responsible for about 0.1 to 0.5%. But again, really important. It's crucial for root development, not just fruit set. So we need it from the beginning of the round. And I blame the hydro stores for this bit of misinformation. We've all been told over and over and over again that harvest metric is so intimately tied to P, and it needs to be in these fruiting, flower, bloom recipes. And honestly, it's kind of late at that point, and you really need phosphorus throughout the life of the plant. And a plant with short, clubby roots due to phosphorus deficiency is never going to deliver the optimal harvest metric targets that you should be shooting for. So while it's crucial for proper development of generative parts, the fruiting parts, or the buds, think buds, phosphorus is required for all energy transactions in the plant, and it really needs to be there from the onset. I typically think of it for roots and fruit set, but it's in your ATP and your ADP. It's the P in both of those. So you desperately need it throughout the entire life of your plant. And so phosphorus is taken up by plants as orthophosphate. That's H2PO4 negative or HPO4 2 negatives. And the primary source is soil minerals in an organic setting. There's some that comes from organic matter and compost and that sort of stuff. And we occasionally do see folks that have a relatively low reserve, but have really great available because of their compost. So it depends on the source. There's, we'll get into sources later, but there's multiple ionic phosphorus inputs, partly, in the same way as there's a lot of ionic nitrogen inputs because we've got all these people to feed. And then with phosphorus, because it's so slow to release in organic systems where we, kind of lean heavily on bone and soft rock, they've developed a lot of ionic, pretty much immediately available forms. And we'll talk about those a little bit, but we'll try to stay focused on organics for the most part. We really don't want to add too much bone because it also brings in significant nitrogen and can cause us to overshoot our nitrogen targets. And if we try to go hard on the soft rock phosphate side of things, we can tip the scales in favor of heavy metal uptake that we don't want. And then finally, we really want to avoid guanos. These are potentially dangerous to humans. Google histoplasmosis, and I would hope that you would never use guanos again, but it can wipe out bat populations, which we desperately need, a huge, keystone species. It can vector white-nosed bat fungus, and then harvesting guanos destroys these really fragile, really important ecosystems. So just like lady beetles, hopefully folks have gotten the word and they're not using guanos anymore. How does phosphorus function in the plant? So the most important role of phosphorus in the plant is the transference of energy. That we've mentioned this repeatedly. I always talk about how it's the currency in your plant. So there's a name for this, phosphorylation. And phosphorylation is the transfer of H2PO4 molecules, which are, really heavy in energy. They've got those strong triple bonds for phosphorus, remember? So from ATP to energy requiring processes throughout the plant. And so this allows us and plants, the same thing happens in humans, with phosphorus and ATP, but it allows us to store and use energy. And so this is the process of moving from ATP to ADP. And so ATP, adenosine triphosphate, converts to ADP, adenosine diphosphate, triphosphate to diphosphate. So we lost a phosphate group. And the energy that's released from that missing phosphate group is now available to your plant for metabolic processing. And then phosphorus does a lot of other things that we'll highlight real quickly. None of this is as simple or binary as we'd like it to be for the sake of study. So you can't say it's just fruiting, it's just roots. Phosphate forms the backbone of your DNA and your RNA. Was pretty important, right? Those are the internal instructions that tell your cells not just what they are, but how they should perform and function. Phosphorus is also needed to form phospholipids, coenzymes, phosphoproteins. So it's not only nitrogen that's forming proteins. And then pretty much any and all important metabolic processes in the plant are going to require some of that orthophosphate or some form of P. Uptake, again, occurs primarily as H2PO4 or HPO4. Those are two forms of orthophosphate. Organic compounds like nucleic acids are most likely converted in the root zone to H2PO4 orthophosphate prior to uptake. And there's been a lot of study with regard to phosphorus in root development. It comes from corn, soybean, row crops. Those folks have a lot of money to do studies. So we shouldn't ignore those studies. We should take advantage of them since we're in we work with a crop that there really is no funding for. So, it's been well documented that less than sufficient phosphorus will result in short, clubby roots, and that's going to lead to less mineral uptake availability and, eventually a lower harvest metric. And so that obviously would make sense that, for less than optimized water uptake, anchoring, if we don't have sufficient P, we'll have all these different root problems. And because of this, it's crucial to get phosphorus into the soil ahead of time. It breaks down really slowly, and it's, lime and phosphorus move the slowest as far as mobility in the soil, and it breaks down really slowly. Usually needs the help of some specialized phosphorus solubilizing bacteria to liberate it. We like to use mammoth P or microbial mass. And then phosphorus or phosphates are highly reactive in the soil as well. And so they're only going to move an inch or so. Again, back to that mobility. So it's really important to incorporate it thoroughly and homogeneously throughout the entire soil profile. Top dressing with organic phosphorus inputs is not going to get you very far. If you have an emergency, you've got purpling, use fish hydrolysate because the phosphoric acid that's used to stabilize most of those products will give your plant an immediately available bump of P. So that's my go-to if I'm late in the round and need to turn that around. Liquid fish hydrolysate usually will take that out for you in 24 to 48 hours. Because phosphorus is hard to liberate, many plants have formed symbiotic relationships with mycorrhizal fungi, which, everybody, I think, is familiar with mycorrhiza that would be watching this video. I would hope so. But in order to get better access to P, they form these relationships. And so it's important that you make this infection early before you plant, so I'll take a tray and put mycorrhiza down, and I'll take all my bare rooted clones and just set them on there. So I'm making a direct infection to the root before they go into soil, before they get any sufficient phosphorus. If you try to make the infection after the plant has adequate to phosphorus, the relationship will most likely fail. And this makes sense. The plant is almost always going to take the least energy dependent path. It's going to be easier to skip the mycorrhizal infection if there's plenty of P available. So when you're selecting mycorrhiza, make sure that you find a product that's low in heavy metals and has sufficient spore count to actually form the infection. Tad and I see lots of products that list mycorrhiza, but when you dig a little bit deeper into the CFUs, the colony forming units, we find that they're way too low to actually have any kind of productive impact. And so the devil is always in the details. Just because it's on the bag doesn't mean that it might very well be in there, but it's probably not going to do anything for you. We want endomycorrhiza, not ecto. Ectomycorrhiza forms relationships, but mostly with trees. So we want to focus on endomycorrhiza, especially with this plant. And then the fungi is receiving energy from the plant roots, and in return, the mycorrhiza mines the soil phosphorus and makes it available to the plant. It's not really producing it, but it does make it available. And then hopefully you'll remember from our dichotomous key that phosphorus is a mobile element, meaning it'll show up as a deficiency lower on the plant. And then mobile elements can be translocated to apical generative parts. So a mobile element will leave older material on the lowers and move up the plant to the generative parts where reproduction or fruit set will happen. That's the biological mission of the plant. So it's going to give those areas the love. And so this is really important also, phosphorus, for breeders who want to complete seed formation, at the end of sense. You want to make sure that you not only take your plants long enough to have fully formed seeds, but that you've got adequate phosphorus so that they'll go ahead and finish. Symptoms of deficiency, short clubby roots that we mentioned previously, those are going to be hard to see until after the round, but typically we'll see stunting, dark blue or purpling leaves or stems, lower leaf chlorosis. Don't confuse that with nitrogen. You'll usually get splotchy areas with this chlorosis as well. And then again, the most common deficiency symptom for phosphorus is purpling. And that lack of phosphorus means that there's no energy to process anthocyanins. And anthocyanins are just purple pigments that start to stack in the stems. As humans, we like anthocyanins. We spend a lot of money on them in health food stores to eat and drink anthocyanins because they're antioxidants that, get rid of free radicals in our bodies. But for our plants, it's a problem. It's a visual display that there's not sufficient phosphorus. Like nitrogen, especially in organic systems, phosphorus availability is highly reliant on microbial activity. We always talk about what are the factors that impact uptake, and, particle size is one, but the things we always talk about are temperature, moisture levels, and pH. Same for phosphorus, no surprise. And so with phosphorus availability, and we just mentioned these phosphorus solubilizing bacteria and how important they are, they're really susceptible to cool temperatures. And so, cool temps can dramatically impact uptake in a negative way. Heavy clay soils that are really compacted will also cause issues for pea uptake, if you're outdoors, and that's just because it's restricting the root growth. And any root growth issues, root aphids, pathogens, chemical, physical damage, those are going to limit uptake. And that would also be over and underwater, because in both cases, you're losing fine root tip hairs. They're dying, and so you're going to have uptake problems. And so this creates an overall stunted plant. And this can be really hard to judge, because if you're not familiar with the cultivar, you might think it looks great. And then, at the end of the round, you pull it and your root balls are kind of small. And this is not the harvest that your buddy got, and, whatever. But so that can be a hard one. And then with the, current proliferation of purple cultivars, it can be harder to diagnose, because purpling can be from genetics, temperatures, really high light, PPFD, or a phosphorus deficiency. So it could be a lot of different things. Since it's so important right behind nitrogen, and because it's so hard to liberate, why don't we just throw tons of phosphorus into the soil? In indoor growing in raised beds, we can do this to some extent, and we can add significant bone and soft rock phosphate applications because we have little to no runoff. But effluence is a huge deal, big deal outdoors. Negative environmental impacts from overapplication of phosphorus is right up there with the overapplication of nitrogen for damaging impacts to our environment. Overapplication of phosphorus creates excessive algal growth in water systems, chokes out all the oxygen, kills all your fish, destroys aquatic environments. We have a breathtaking lake that's really close to my house, Anderson Lake. And if you didn't know better, you'd jump right in. Unlike South Carolina, where I moved from, not only does it look pristine, there's no gators, there's no venomous snakes, there's no bull sharks. Like, what could go wrong? It's literally begging for somebody to swim in it. It looks like a postcard lake. Farming, however, in the early 1900s, not the 70s, 80s, not the 60s, the early 1900s, and overuse of phosphorus in those farming practices has created a toxic situation we really don't have a solution for, with incredibly high levels of phosphorus that create these incredibly high levels of cyanobacteria. And these are very toxic algal growth, algal blooms, and several dogs have died from swimming in this lake, which is really heartbreaking as a somebody who loves dags. And swimming is prohibited because it can be lethal for humans as well. So really sad situation. And just goes to show you that a bad decision now can have lasting impacts for hundreds, if not longer, hundreds of years. So it can choke out the fish, creates dead zones, and we really just there's no easy way to reclaim these. So phosphorus effluence has severe impacts on downstream water systems. So we want to be very judicious in how we apply that. So with that little bit of bad Debbie Downer news, I think we're going to wrap up for phosphorus. We'll do some more videos on phosphorus cycling and that kind of stuff. I'm trying to keep the homie Buzzy Funny's advice close to heart with these and make these shorter, but I do hope that they're helping somebody and helping folks to understand this fascinating world of plants. And let's see, I'll be at Cultivate this week with Tad. Maybe we can do a live on Instagram or some other platform. And then I'll be dropping another grower interview next Wednesday. And that will be another Jared. It's the, July is the month of Jareds, I guess. So another cool interview. Hopefully you'll tune in for that. And then I'm hoping I'll get another Soil Nerd video up Thursday of next week, but with travel, I might have to skip it, which wouldn't be the worst thing, and give you guys a chance to catch up on these videos. I know that they can be kind of information dense, but thank you as always for tuning in, hanging out, giving a like, engaging, subscribing, telling a friend. Really appreciate you. Have a great day.